Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss any update from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Join the only official Telegram channel of Rouse IAS Study Circle to get the relevant materials and important updates. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified. The what, why and how of the newspaper analysis from a civil service examinations perspective. So today we are going to discuss the Hindu Delhi edition dated 8th August 2022. The topics which are to be discussed have been displayed on your screen and the time stamping of the same has been provided in the description box below. So now let us begin our discussion. Our first topic has appeared in today's The Hindu Delhi edition at the text and the context page. This topic is in relation to the Great Barrier Reef that is found on the eastern coast of Australia. The Great Barrier Reef is nothing but a coral reef. Now corals, what are corals? Now these are one of the most fascinating as well as beautiful features which are found beneath the sea surface. They not just have their aesthetic importance but they also have a very high economic as well as ecological significances. That is why in today's session we are going to learn about all the possible dimensions related to the coral reefs. However, the latest context in which this article has appeared is that the researchers have pointed out towards a slight increase in the coral cover on the eastern coast of Australia. But side by side they have also warned that this trend could also reverse owing to the rising global temperatures. And moreover, few months back there was also the event of mass coral bleaching. And that is why the researchers are of the opinion that because in that particular area the coral bleaching has already taken place, that is why that particular area needs to be preserved and conserved. As far as this syllabus is concerned, this topic falls under the General Studies Paper 3 section of Environment and the micro section which mentions conservation, environmental pollution and degradation. So in this very regard, today we are going to discuss about the basics of the coral reefs. What are the factors which are responsible for their formation, their global distribution, their significance, what exactly do we mean by coral bleaching, and what are the various factors, that is local as well as global factors, which influence the mass deaths of corals. So now let us begin our discussion in detail. So first of all, we need to understand that what are corals and what are coral reefs. Now corals are the marine invertebrate animals. Keep this thing in mind that corals are the animals. And these animals are the lime secreting organism, that is their skeletal remains do secrete the calcium carbonate, that is the lime. So corals are the animals that is invertebrate, they do not have their spinal cords. And what happens is that initially the polyp grows over a particular area. There are certain conditions responsible for this, but if those conditions are met, there are several polyps which clog together, which come together and form the groupings. So that is why polyp 1, polyp 2, polyp 3 and hence several polyps come together, and this colony of polyps is known as the corals. So now corals are of two types, that is hard corals as well as soft corals. The hard corals are those corals which extract the calcium carbonate from the seawater, because the seawater also contains certain amount of calcium carbonate, and from those water these are extracted to build the rocks. These are the hard corals, and that is why, because they are extracting the calcium carbonate and they are laying the foundation to build the coral reefs, they are also known as the engineers of the coral ecosystem. On the other hand, the soft corals live on the coral reefs which are formed by these hard corals. Moreover, they also secrete their own calcium carbonate from the dead remains of their skeleton body. So corals are the animals and the reefs are the rock structures which are formed out of the accumulation and compaction of the calcium carbonate produced by the corals or extracted by these corals. So I hope the coral reefs are clear to you. Corals are the animals and reefs are the rock structures formed out of them. Now there are certain favorable conditions which help in coral formation. First of all, warm waters. The temperature of the waters in which the corals can be formed ranges on an average around 23 degrees Celsius to 29 degrees Celsius. They are also found within the thermal range starting from 20 degrees Celsius up to 32 degrees Celsius. But it is to be understood here that corals are not the eurythermal species, rather they are stenothermal species. What do you mean by stenothermal species? That they can tolerate very low level of temperature changes. If there are slight changes in the temperature, then there can be an event of mass coral deaths. So, warm water is the first criteria for them to form. The second important criteria is the shallow waters. Now, there is a simple logic for it, because if the waters are very deep, then sunlight will not be able to penetrate up to certain depths. But if the waters are shallow, then only the sunlight can penetrate up to the sea base, and that is why the temperature of the water in shallow areas will remain warm, that is within this particular range. So if you need to have warm waters, obviously you need to have shallow waters as well. The third important thing is clear waters. Now, because what happens is that because of the excessive sedimentation or presence of dust particles or molecules in the waters, they can clog the mouth of the corals, and that is how the corals will begin to die. So that is why clear waters are required, and those waters should be in between the purely fresh waters as well as purely saline waters. Excessively fresh or excessively saline waters both are harmful for corals. The next important criteria is the pollution levels. Again, if we are having high number of pollutants, or if we are having toxic chemicals in the seawater, these chemicals can hinder the sunlight to reach up to the sea surface, and that is why the water will not be warmed and hence the corals will die. And the last important factor is the wildlife population. Now, the corals live in a marine ecosystem, and the ecosystem thrives upon the well strengthened and sustainable food web which exists over there. So that is why if we are having a high amount of biological diversity, that is wildlife population in that particular area, that will help to keep a check on the prey population, and that is how they can support the corals to grow. So these are the 5 favorable conditions which influence the coral formations. Now if we have to look at the global distribution of the corals, you just have to think that which are those regions whereby these 5 conditions are fulfilled, and most importantly these natural factors, that is warm, shallow and clear waters. So now let us look at the global distribution of the corals. Obviously, because we require the warm water, and hence the coral formation will take place in the tropical area. Second, because we require shallow waters, hence the corals will form mainly across the coast, that is the continental shelf areas. So that is why most of the corals are formed along the coast of India, in the Southeast Asian region with areas lying in the tropical region, and in the eastern coast of Australia we have already known that Great Barrier Reef is formed. Similarly, in the Caribbean waters along the coast of the Central America, for example, the areas of Honduras, Panama, etc., we find coral reefs. Similarly, in the coasts of Brazil, we also find them. But again, the corals will not be found in the deep ocean waters, and hence, despite this region being tropical in nature, there are no corals here. So, the conditions which are responsible for the coral formation, if you apply those conditions and you try to identify that which are those areas which fulfill those conditions, you will be able to identify that where the coral reefs are formed. In this very line next comes why the coral reefs are so much significant. Why now and then several environmentalists raise their voices in order to preserve and conserve this ecosystem. First and the foremost thing is their ecological significance, that is the biodiversity which it supports. Now it is estimated that out of the total areas of the ocean waters, the area in which the coral ecosystem thrives is just around 1%. But this 1% of that total area sustains 25% of the marine population, marine diversity. So that means just 1% of this area supports 25% of the biodiversity of the marine waters. Second comes the economic significance, that is their huge potential of tourism as well as employment generation. For example, let's take only the case of Australia. In just one country, the coral ecosystem boosts around $4.6 billion of economy, and that is just on the basis of tourism. Just the tourism industry, which derives its revenue from the coral ecosystem, is pegged at $4.6 billion. And this supports around 60,000 of the employment avenues as well. The third important thing is the fishings. Most of the areas in which the coral lives, they are also known for their fishing industries. The reason, because we have discussed that corals are the areas where there are huge biological diversity, and that is why the fishes also flourish. In these areas we also have planktons. So that is why again the planktons are very favorable for the fishes to grow. Next, there is geomorphic significance also. For example, what happens is, let's say this is India and here we are having the coral reefs. So whenever the cyclones will try to hit this particular area, or whenever the sea waves will try to breach this area, we have a rock structure which will hinder their free movement, and hence they can protect the coastal erosion in these areas. They can protect the marine flood waters to enter into the land, and hence they can in turn reduce the loss of life as well as property. So these are multi-dimensional significance, that is ecological significance, economic significance, geomorphic significance. They are also important for human health as well, and also the recreational activities. But nowadays, because of the various anthropogenic activities, there is a thing which is known as the coral bleaching. Now coral bleaching is taking place. Now what exactly is the coral bleaching? Now let us understand this particular concept from this diagram. Now there is a symbiotic relationship between the corals as well as the algae species known as zooxanthellae. So the areas where the healthy corals are found, they will be the areas which were having this symbiotic mutual relationship, that is the corals as well as algae present over there. But then because of certain factors, we find stressed coral ecosystem, whereby the algae leaves this coral ecosystem and now the corals are by their own. And because of the leaving of these algae, there is a discoloration of the corals, and this discoloration, that is, you can see here from these colors, the corals now have become white. So this discoloration of the coral is known as bleaching of the coral. Now this coral bleaching can be because of various natural as well as human factors. So let us see that what are the local as well as the global threats which are deteriorating the quality of the coral ecosystem across the world. First, we will see the local threats. Now, there can be a physical damage or destruction of the corals. This can be on account of the coastal developmental activities like dredging, quarrying. Then there are several excessive economic activities, unsustainable practices, for example, destructive fishing practices. Then there are also misuses of the tourism or the recreational activities. For example, when the tourists travel in the lagoon lakes in the coral ecosystem, they physically touch or remove certain coral species. So that is how the physical damage or the destruction can lead to alteration of the coral ecosystem. Second is the excessive sedimentation. This point we have already discussed, that because of the presence of various sediments or the pollutants, there can be the clogging of the mouths of the coral polyps, and if their mouths are clogged, then eventually they will die. Third is the excessive nutrients. Now, despite the fact that nutrient rich water is beneficial for the coral, but when there are excessive nutrients, they lead to increase in the population of the algae, and once the population of the algae increase, there is a disturbance in the entire food ecosystem of that particular area, and hence the corals will die. Similarly, the presence of pathogens or the toxic substances can introduce various coral diseases. For example, white band disease or the black band disease, etc. Then presence of the trash or the microplastic can block the sunlight to reach to the corals, and then these microplastic can also enter into the digestive systems of corals, fishes, etc. Then because of the overfishing, we can understand that there will be a disturbance in the food web. And similarly, other human activities, for example, the coral harvesting for trade as well as jewelry, also alter or rather disturb the coral ecosystem. So these are the local factors. That is, in certain areas, either this factor would be dominant, or let's say this factor is dominant, or the combination of these factors will be dominant. But then there are global factors also. That is, those phenomena which are occurring worldwide, and therefore they are not region specific, rather, they are disturbing the coral ecosystem of the whole globe. For example, on account of the release of greenhouse gases and the resultant global warming effect, we all know that there is a significant rise in the ocean temperature. Now, this rise in the ocean temperature is very much detrimental for the algae population, and that is how the algae start leaving those areas. There is a huge algae loss, and as we have discussed, that because algae and corals have a symbiotic mutual relationship, even if one component is removed from that system, the other component will eventually die. So that is why if there is an algae loss, there will be the coral bleaching and mass deaths. Similarly, if there are changes in the ocean chemistry, for example, let us assume that ocean acidification is on rise. Now, because of the ocean acidification, the pH levels will get altered, and hence it can in turn affect the entire marine ecosystem and thus can lead to the bleaching events. So these are certain threats which are responsible for the coral destructions, the local as well as the global threats. Now, let us revise this topic in brief once again. So initially we discussed that what do we exactly mean by corals, what are coral reefs, and what are different types of corals, that is the hard corals as well as soft corals. Then we saw that which are those favorable conditions which lead to coral formation, that is the warm waters, shallow waters, clear waters, lack of pollution, and presence of wildlife population. And then we saw the global distribution of the coral ecosystem across the world, and here we learned that the coral formation takes place in the shallow areas of the tropical waters. Then, coming to the significance, we saw that there are ecological, economic, geomorphic, as well as the health significance. In this line, we learned about the phenomena of the coral bleaching, and in the end, we discussed that there are certain local threats which operate in a particular area, and then there are certain global threats which operate throughout the globe. And these factors are leading to the destruction of the coral ecosystem. Now, this topic is from the prelims perspective and is a very short topic. This will be a factual topic and has appeared at page number 5 in today's The Hindu Delhi edition. This topic is in relation to the Cheruthoni Dam, which is located in the state of Kerala. The context of this very news article is that, as we all know, that the onset of the Indian monsoon and especially its burst in the state of Kerala is very severe, and there are severe chances of rising flood levels in the state. In this very regard, the administration is gearing up to manage this excess supply of water, and that is why the dam management becomes a critical thing. In this very regard, recently, the three shutters of the Cheruthoni Dam, which is in the Idukki district of Kerala, were opened. Now, from the prelims perspective, this topic is important because there can be questions which can be directly asked on the location of the dam, or the reservoir names, or the rivers on which these dams are located. So let us see certain key facts related to this particular dam. Now, first of all, there is one Idukki hydroelectric project in Kerala, and this project has three dams. Out of these three dams, one is the Cheruthoni Dam. The other two dams are the Idukki Dam as well as Kulamavu Dam. And all these three dams in totality form a large reservoir known as the Idukki Reservoir. This Cheruthoni Dam is built on the river named as same, that is Cheruthoni, and this dam is fed by the spillway water of this Idukki reservoir. So, what are the key facts? The name is the Cheruthoni Dam, state is Kerala, district is Idukki, and this dam is a part of Idukki hydroelectric project. There are two other dams also, Idukki Arch Dam and Kulamavu Dam. So this was a very brief topic, but because it has appeared in today's paper, so let us not leave this topic. This topic has appeared at page number 10 in today's newspaper and is in relation to the international relations and maritime security. The topic reads, India begins cooperation with the Combined Maritime Forces. In short form, it is known as CMF. And actually, this is the very context of this article also. India has formally commenced the cooperation with the Bahrain based multilateral partnership. Now, this is an important fact that CMF is based in the Bahrain, and India recently has joined as an associate partner. This is very important. There's a difference between associate partner and member. India has just joined as the associate partner. So as you can see, this is the West Asian region, and this is the same region whereby the CMF will be the most dominant. However, the areas of operation of the CMF goes beyond this local borders also, and there are variety of tasks which can be assigned to this CMF. But this will be the most dominant region of CMF. Now CMF is a multinational maritime partnership and it exists to uphold the rule-based international order. The main aim of the CMF is to counter the non-state actors as well as to tackle various kinds of organized crime, especially in the maritime domain. The main focus areas of the CMF are countering the narcotics, countering the smuggling activities, suppressing the maritime piracy, encouraging the regional cooperations. Now, these are directly related to the security. However, if the need arises, the CMF can also be asked to respond to various environmental as well as humanitarian crises or incidents. Presently, as we have discussed that it is a multinational partnership, it has 34 member nations. Now, out of these 34 member nations, let us see some of the important members. Australia, Bahrain, obviously where it is based, Brazil, because Brazil is important for India because it is also part of BRICS. Then we have Canada, Egypt, France, as well as Germany from Europe, two important powers. Then we also have Iraq, Japan, we have Malaysia, Pakistan, very important, UAE, UK, US, Yemen, Saudi. That means from the West Asian region, an important country that is Iran is not its member, Russia is not its member, and among the bordering countries, only Pakistan is its member. CMF, but the organizational structure of the CMF is heavily dominated by US and UK because CMF is commanded by the US Navy Vice Admiral and the deputy commander of the CMF is the United Kingdom's Royal Navy Commodore. Then, as we have discussed that these are the specific tasks of the CMF, there are various combined task forces also. Now, these numbers are not very important, but the idea is to enhance the efficiency and specificity. There are different combined task forces which are responsible for different tasks in different areas. So that is all about the Combined Maritime Forces, of which India has recently become the associate partner. This topic has appeared at page number 4. Actually, this has not appeared in the form of the news, but this picture is there in the newspaper and is in relation to the recent flaunt of tourists in the Borra caves. This is the very context of this article also. The tourists have flooded at the million-year-old Borra caves near the Araku Valley, which lies in Andhra Pradesh. So let us see some of the key facts related to these caves, again mostly relevant from the prelims examinations perspective. Now these Borra caves are located on the eastern coast of India in the Anantagiri Hills. Important fact, in the Araku Valley, another important fact, in the state of Andhra Pradesh, another important fact. So again, they are located in Anantagiri Hills, near Araku Valley, and in the state of Andhra Pradesh. Now, geologically speaking, these are one of the largest as well as the deepest caves found in India, and these caves were discovered by William King George of the Geological Survey of India. Now, there is one more geographical significance of these caves. These caves are formed on the karst topography. Now, what is karst topography? Now, karst topography is the topography dominated by the limestone and the sandstone rocks, and they are mostly eroded by the rainwater, that is surface water, as well as the groundwater. The main weathering phenomena which is dominated in this particular topography is the form of chemical weathering. The river which is there in these Borra caves is the Ghosthani river, and as we all know that there are certain landforms which are associated with the karst topography, and out of those landforms stalactites and stalagmites are very important. That is why in these Borra caves we found stalactites as well as stalagmites. Now, what are these stalactites and stalagmites? They are basically the depositional features in the form of pillars which are formed in the caves. Then, these caves also bear certain essential features like Shiva Parvati, Rishi's beard, mother child, crocodile, human brain, tiger, as well as cows. So again, a very small topic, factual in nature. The Borra caves are located in the Anantagiri hills in the Araku Valley in the state of Andhra Pradesh. They were discovered by William King George, and they form the part of the karst topography, and therefore they have the landforms associated with this very topography in the form of stalactites as well as stalagmites. Both of these landforms are depositional in nature. Now, this is for the reference topic and has appeared at page number 6 in the article section. The topic reads Tapping the Technology to Check the Minor Mineral Plunder. Now, the context of this very article is that because of the several illicit as well as illegal mining which is rampant across India, we should reap the technological potential in order to conserve it. So the main theme out of this topic which is relevant for the civil service examination is the mining industry or the illegal mining. And therefore I request you to go back to the DNS dated 20th July 2022, whereby Jatin sir has covered the issue in detail. He has discussed all the causes of illegal mining, which are in the terms of lack of coordination, lack of timely checks, not properly defined boundary areas, lack of timely renewals of the contracts, cheaper minerals, poor monitoring systems, as well as collusive corruption. Further, he has also discussed in detail the various government initiatives which have been taken in order to enhance the efficiency, transparency, as well as accountability in the mining sector. Then, he has further gone to discuss all the consequences of the illegal mining in terms of underground mining as well as strip mining, and has also discussed the various health issues which are related to this mining activity. So that is why you are again requested to go back to the DNS dated 20 July 2022, revise it and use it to write beautiful answers. So now is the time for the question of the day. The question from yesterday's DNS is in front of you. There are 3 statements given and you have to find the correct statement out of these given 3 statements in the context of the significance of the genome sequencing. Statement 1 says that it helps in understanding the outbreak better. 2. Understanding the evolution much more accurately. 3. Tracking the spread of pathogens. There are 4 options given. Option A, 1 and 3 only. B, 2 and 3 only. C, 1 and 2 only. Or D, 1, 2 and 3. So the correct answer for this question was option D, that is 1, 2 and 3. Genome sequencing can help us to have all these 3 benefits. The question from today's DNS is, you have to consider the following statements. Again, there are 3 statements. These statements are in the context of CMF, which we have discussed in today's DNS. Statement 1 says, India has become a full-time member of the CMF. Statement 2 says, CMF is a multinational maritime partnership of countries to ensure maritime security in the West Indian Ocean. Option 3 says, CMF helps to counter international terrorism, including the narcotics and piracy. Options are A, 1 and 2, B, 2 and 3, C, 1 and 3, or D, 1, 2 and 3. So that's all for today. All the very best and study hard.